Hello, my name is Erica Nelson. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for USTA Texas. I'm here with some great panelists as we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. This is a month amongst many others that we celebrate, whether it's Heritage Days or months, to really shine the light on the uniqueness of the Texas tennis community, whether it's a celebration and awareness, creating some education around the people that make Texas tennis special. And so I'm really excited about the panelists we have with us. But first, just a little background about Hispanic Heritage Month. It began on September and begins on September 15th based on the Independence Day of 5 countries, Costa Rica, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And certainly from the 15th, going right into September 16th, 16 de septiembre. I messed that up because I'm nervous, but y'all know the 16th of September is an important day to us here in Texas because it is Independence Day for Mexico. Certainly the Hispanic community here in our state is heavily Mexican American, and so that day certainly there's a lot of events around that day here in our state. And so as we go from September 15th to October 15th, it began as Hispanic Heritage Week in 1968, and then was extended to Hispanic Heritage Month in 1988. And so from that time forward has been a day that certainly a lot of celebrations go on. And today I'm happy to have some great leaders to help us all understand and appreciate what the culture means to them, their connection, and really allow us to get some insight into their experiences being a part of the Texas tennis community. So with no further ado, I will have make a short introduction of our panelists and then get into some questions. First and foremost, DiegoRomo. Diego is a 19-year-old collegiate tennis player at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He is a business major and sport management minor. He is from Laredo, Texas, and has interned at the Laredo Tennis Association. Diego, thank you for joining us today. DebraLaPorte. Deb has many years of experience, not only with USTA Texas, but certainly on the national level, whether it was teaching or coaching youth, high school, and collegiate tennis players. She also has more than 15 years experience creating, facilitating, coordinating programs for youth and adults in the sport. She has extensive experience as it relates to not only USTA Texas, but also on the national level, and has represented and been a part of 2 different USTA sections, New England and Texas, and currently is the chairperson for our sportsmanship, Diego, our sportsmanship committee. Thank you, Deb, for being here as well. And was a collegiate student athlete. So we've got 2 collegiate current and former tennis student athletes with us. BeckiWortham. Becky is a member of the USTA, as Deb is as well, a member of the USTA Texas Board of Directors. Becky also is a member of the USTA Board of Directors and is also a member of the USTA Texas Management Committee. She is part of the cohort for the USTA Leadership Development Committee or group. She is on the San Antonio Tennis Association Board, and is the chairperson for the facility committee. If I have that correct, Becky, do I have that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's facilities chair.
Facilities chair. Thank you. She's a part of the San Antonio Women's Leadership Organization and is a part of the USTA National Training Advisory Group. Becky, thank you for being with us. And certainly last but not least, BobbyDuran. Bobby is another former collegiate tennis player, played at UTSA just a few years ago, right, Bobby? Few years ago, also played in the Olympic trials back in 1984. He's also played in Europe shortly thereafter from 1988 to 1990, and since has matriculated to the officials world. So he has a unique perspective as it relates to our officials, and excited to hear from each of you as it relates to your perspectives and being the present and the future for our sport. And certainly Diego, having started at the age of 5, Diego, I read has, this is a part of who you are, and hopefully you'll continue to be a part of the legacy and the future of our sport. So thank all four of you for being with us today, and I look forward to our discussion. Deb, we're going to start with you with this first question. We know that Hispanic Heritage Month is an exciting time for our state, and it certainly holds a special significance for each one of you, I'm sure. Can you share with us what Hispanic Heritage Month means to you, and is there a change agent, someone from the Hispanic Latinx community that has been impactful, whether it is overall or to you personally or within your community?
So, well, thank you for having us, Erica. We really appreciate it. I'm just going to start by saying that for me, the culture of being Hispanic, I'm Mexican American. My great ancestors, great grandparents migrated here from Mexico. So my first language was Spanish. I didn't even know English when I went to kindergarten. I grew up in a very small town in Texas, Goliad, predominantly Hispanic. So in terms of like the culture, like I never really had to think of myself as a minority or as like I wasn't part of some community, because it was just so ingrained in everything that I did or how my family treated us. One thing you'll know about Hispanic and Latin families is that we're very familial. Everything is, there's a nucleus, like we don't, like all of my tios and tias raised me, not just my parents. Like my whole, like anytime at dinner, there'd be 10, 15, 20 people at one dinner table every night of the week. So holiday celebrations, they were special, not because we were all gathered, but they were just special because it was just the way we were raised and taught. And so I never really had to think about being a minority. I don't know if that makes sense to the rest of you, but personally for me, I never had to think about it until I left the state of Texas. And I predominantly for 30 years was on the East Coast. And that's when I really had to start thinking about it. And so for me, my great grandmother was widowed young. She had 8 children. She raised them all on her own. And she had 3 like rebels of daughters, like one of them being my maternal grandmother. And so to me, that's why I look to my heritage is these strong women. And like, I guess if I was going to say there was some other outside influence, someone like Eva Perón from Argentina, just the strength that she had. And that's kind of what I see in my heritage, in my maternal side, is these really strong women. And I never really thought that I was being like a great leader of my culture until my daughter, who's 27, she would start telling me things like about, things that she would do is like, yeah, it's just like my Latina side really came out today, or, oh, I remember when you used to, do this. Why did we do this? And I never really thought of it. It was just stuff that was ingrained in us that we just almost always did. And so I've passed that on, but but more by just because it was who we are, instead of like having to have this like sort of prescripted culture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah, I can also really relate to what you said about your grandmother and my mother, were my really just great rock and examples for me. Hispanic Heritage Month to me means richness in history, our line, tenure. It's just such a diverse culture, and it's all inclusive. Like you say, the word familia, that you don't know anything but that. I mean, my grandmother overcame such adversity and challenges, and my mother, who had to leave grade school for a time to help the family pick cotton just to put food on their table. I mean, those were the struggles that they had to endure through the changing world and the times, but yet they were able to achieve such greatness through all that hard time that they were able to share their struggles with us and what it really means to achieve and to work hard. And they were able to own their own houses and have property. And so the ever changing of support of family being there was just greatness as far as instead in us. As far as, and you mentioned somebody wonderful, an actress that comes to me is Rita Moreno. I know you probably all heard Gone with the Wind. And she was the first Hispanic woman that got an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. She is also only one of 3 people to ever achieve the coveted EGOT award. That status is winning an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. And then in 2019, she also achieved the Peabody Award. So there's only 3 people who have ever done that. So that just leaves a lot for us to desire in women leaders in Hispanic. Thank you.
Yeah, I can also add on to a little bit of what Deborah was saying about not really knowing what it feels like to be like a minority in a certain community, because I grew up in Laredo, Texas, where it's pretty much predominantly Hispanic. And I think the kind of the eye opener for me was figuring out my grandfather, Dr. Alfredo Trevino, was the first Hispanic president of the Texas section of USTA. So when I all of my role models were all in Laredo, they're all Hispanic, they're all people just like me. So I never thought about that, but him being able to be the first out there in Texas, and it really made me realize like how much of a importance it is to like get the tennis game to the Hispanic community and get us out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about tennis in general, the Hispanic or Latin players are all from those countries. There's not anyone from America that has succeeded as a Latin, Hispanic, Mexican. You know, they're all from, you know, Europe or, you know, South America. So, I mean, I think that obviously, Diego, is an area where we can make some impact right here in the United States.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was hoping, Diego, you would mention your lineage. You can't think of tennis in Laredo and not think of Dr. T, may he rest in peace, and Mrs. T. So, you know, your legacy there and lineage from them certainly is really strong. And I don't know what Laredo tennis would be like if it wasn't for their leadership, Dr. T being the first and only Hispanic person to lead USTA Texas thus far. Anything to add, Bobby, about Hispanic Heritage Month or anyone that's been impactful to you, a change agent in your life or in your community?
Well, it would definitely have to be my parents. They were both only children, and they were both orphans. And so, you know, my dad was a World War II former Marine vet. So it was a lot of discipline in the household and a lot of, you know, pick yourself up by the bootstraps type of mentality and go out there and get what you deserve and fight for it. And so, yeah, I mean, it would be, you know, my mom raised 6 kids, you know, I mean, both of them actually, mom, stay-at-home mom, but again, I relate to what Deborah was saying about family and family get-togethers. I mean, the Thanksgivings and the Christmases, and you know, they were just full of kids and grandkids, which would be my nephews and nieces. And I never had the pleasure of having grandparents because, like I said, both of my parents were orphans. So it was nice to see that generation of their grandkids were able to experience that, my kids and my siblings' kids. It's just been, it was really just a lot of work ethic, a lot of work hard. And he worked civil service, but then he also worked as an electrician on the side. He had a master's electrician, degree, business. So a lot of times growing up, if I wanted to see my dad, I had to go work with him on the weekends, which I did. And which was fine because I learned a lot about the electrical business, and I could install plugs and switches and stuff like that, small things in the house that help. So really just taught me a lot about work ethic and family.
I think we're getting a theme here, with family being a big part of it. Certainly when I think about the Hispanic Latinx community, yes, I think about work ethic, I think about family, I think of food, I think of música, and a lot of what you all have said. So thank you for that. Bobby, we're going to go right back to you, my friend. So can each of you just share with us? I always find it interesting to hear about kind of how people get started in tennis. Certainly in the States, it's not one of the more popular sports. There's a lot of competition for your time and for, family dollars. There's a lot of commitment that needs to be in place there, not only for the child, but for the family who needs to support the child or children playing a sport. So Bobby, we'll start with you, and then whoever wants to jump next, just kind of a brief history of how you got into tennis and lead us through transitioning to where you are today.
Well, I was actually kind of tricked into playing tennis. I was in 7th grade and I was going to Nimitz Middle School. And at the time, Robert E. Lee High School was like a very dominant football team in the state of Texas. So it was back when Tommy Kramer was there. I don't know if you guys remember these names, but he eventually played for the Vikings. Anyway, they would go on to state almost every year, in the early to mid 70s. So I wanted to play football, but of course my dad knew that my frame was not anywhere near being able to play football. So he talked my sister into taking me out to teaching me how to play tennis. And so I started playing it, and then I really took to it, and I loved it. And it was fun. It was, I grew up playing baseball, so it was my hand coordination was pretty decent. So I just started playing that, and it was like a lot of fun. And you could play on the weekends, and you didn't have to like grab a bunch of people to go play. Like if you were going to play like touch football or something, you just needed one other person, and you could go. And I just remember in this day and age, I don't know if it even happens anymore, but I used to walk to the middle school, which is, a mile or two away, or then to the high school, which was 1.5 miles, 2 miles away, just to go play tennis. And I'd stay there all day. And that's really and then of course I started playing tournaments, and I had a great coach in high school. And that's really where it all started. I was tricked, basically for my own safety.
And how'd you get into officiating? I think that's interesting, from being on the court to now being off the sidelines, but still in the leadership role.
Well, so to becoming an official, I kind of, after a while, I'm pushing 60, and I was, my daughter's getting ready to graduate from high school, and I wanted to do something where I could give back to the community. And, all the tournaments I played in the adults, I'd always see the officials out there. And I just, for the longest time, I always thought it was a really big undertaking to become an official. And it is. You had to go through some classes and some webinars and some training. But then I thought, this would be a really good way for me to have something to do on the weekends and more importantly, give back to a sport that has done so much for me. And anybody who officiates, I would imagine most people, they're not doing it because of the fantastic income that you get. It's really mostly so you can be, for me, it's so that I can be around the sport. I really like watching kids develop. I've seen a lot. I've been doing it about 4 or 5 years now. So I see the kids that started out when they were 12, and now I see them when they're 17. And it's amazing how to watch them grow and develop. And really, for me, it's just, I just want to be around the sport, and I want to give back to the community.
I can relate with you, Bobby. Officiating for me, I've been an official about 20 years, I think, or close to it. And it was just the love of the game, the love of the sport, especially educating the children, really helping them and watching them grow. It's just astounding what they can do with a little bit of knowledge. You're so right. We don't do it for the love of what we get paid. It's for just the sheer pleasure of being there to support the community and to support the children, in essence, to watch them grow and hopefully be good examples for them that they'll carry on when they get out. There's such an avenue for them getting out of school to help fund their college and things like that. It's a great part-time job to do. You can work as much or as little as you want, and it really does help. I got into playing tennis later in my life. I was in my mid 40s, and it was just on an invitation. And it's the first time I ever picked up a racket. And I was like, whoa, this is a lot of fun. So just started that journey with, after so many years, I became a captain. And then one season I was captain of 4 or 5 teams. One season, you could look at my record, I was on about 12 different teams in one season. It was just all absorption for me. It was such a love of the game and such a great health and exercise experience. I am by profession a registered nurse, and so I knew the health benefits and elements that you got out of it, and it was just a win-win situation for me. Was really passionate about sharing the love, LOVE, of the sport for me with everyone, and was just invited by at that time Margaret Canby, who was a league coordinator, also an official, who introduced me into officiating as well, and she got me involved in the leagues. And from there, after a couple of years, I became league coordinator, and then just started in with the communities and USTA Texas section. Have always given back, and it is such a fulfilling, rewarding volunteer position to hold.
Yeah. So
Oh, go ahead, Diego.
I'll go ahead. So I benefited from a lot of people like you, Becky, that picked up the game later. My grandparents both picked it up later in their life, just like you. And I mean, by the time I was born, they were already all in. So I picked it up from them. At 5 years old, I think 4 or 5 years old probably was when I picked up a racket for the first time. And then I think I played in my first USTA tournament when I was like 8 years old, something like that, pretty early in life. But I played every sport when I was younger, and I think that's the way to do it. It's just I had a lot of the team aspect as well as the individual aspect that tennis gives you, and just a love for competing too. So I developed that all throughout my junior years. I played through all the Zats, champs, super champs, all of that. That was just a fun time. And now I'm playing here at Catholic University. So, I mean, I'm continuing to play tennis, and I plan on playing for the rest of my life. So, hopefully.
That's awesome, Diego. You're the example of why we do what we do, because I can tell you, as someone who's been coaching and teaching for a long time, that I do the same thing as what Bobby was saying. You start and you see the kids when they're like 10 and 12, and then they grow up and you see them playing high school. And I actually was not a tennis player. I was a volleyball player in high school, and I actually went to college to play volleyball on a scholarship. But in my senior year of high school, I had already lettered and I had already got my scholarship. And I went to a very small school. I mean, Collegiate High School is like I think 1A or something. And I walked on to the tennis team and I said, I want to play tennis. And the coach looked at me and was like, have you ever picked up a racket? I'm like, nope. And he's like, okay. And I ended up making the team, and I went to state as a first time senior on the team. So that, but you're right. Once you pick up the racket, it's just like this implosion of like, oh my God, I have to do this every day for 10, 12 hours a day. I don't want to do anything else. And every time someone calls you, you're like there playing. And so yeah, it's just a really great. And then when I became a mom, we did not have it. So we lived on the East Coast in Vermont. But we did not, our closest indoor facility, now mind you, it snows 8 months out of the year. You know, you're in DC now, Diego. I hope you've got your North Face jacket and your Ugg boots. But it snows like it's, you know, like 8 to 10 months out of the year. You really can't be outside playing tennis. But the closest facility was an hour from us, the closest indoor facility. And so it's just a lot, like, and so I started a CTA in my little neighborhood, and I had like 100 kids that came out over the 2 years to just picked up a racket, had never played. Some of the kids who were on high school teams just wanted more training. So yeah, that's kind of how I started giving back. And then I had some really great mentors along the way that taught me a lot about, you know, working with the kids and, you know, helping. And that's how I got involved in USTA at a sectional level. And so, yeah, it's like everyone else said, it's about paying it forward. It's given us a lot, and we're trying to, you know, give that to the people that are coming behind us. So.
Yes, thank you all so much. I can agree with what many of you said in terms of what the sport has given me. It's given me friendships. It's given me relationships. It's given me health benefits. It's given me a place to continue to exercise and feed some of those competitive juices. I'm a very retired former collegiate basketball player, but many moons ago, I was that kid using a wooden racquetball racket, hitting a tennis ball up against my garage. So I kind of came about it honestly, and truly love the sport. And living in New York City, one of my favorite events many moons ago when I lived there in the early 2000s was going to the Open every year. So, you know, that event certainly really invigorates our country for those 2 or 3 weeks. And our job is to keep that momentum going. So I've already learned a bunch from the 4 of you. So thank you so much for your willingness to share. With this next question, Becky, we're going to start with you. If I could get 2 or 3 of you to chime in on this one. Hispanic people are the largest minority group in our state and in our country, and the fastest growing minority group nationally in the sport of tennis. So what is it about tennis that you think draws so many people to it, and what can we do to continue to keep that great momentum going? So Beck, if you can get us started, and then any one of you that want to jump into that question.
Sure. I really think Texas has stepped up as the front runner in leading our industry in Hispanic participation growth. Starting with about 5 years ago, there was an initiative handed down from USTA National, and we started a Hispanic engagement committee. I was fortunate enough to participate with that committee as a vice chair, and we really did some investigating and really utilized the design thinking innovation method of doing a deep dive into what is it about, you know, Hispanics, what would bring them, you know, into our community of tennis and this and that. And the one word that came out was familia. And so embracing the entire culture, not just the individual, the child, and teaching him, but what about the parents that come? What about the aunts, the uncles? And so we developed a program for having the entire family brought into an importance of the health benefits, the steady educational part of the discipline. And it really became a great spread, I think, with all the CTAs of that, understanding the culture, embracing it, I think will really continue to thrust us forward with that momentum, as long as we can understand and take time to truly understand what Hispanic culture is.
I think for me, like, I didn't really have to think, again, I'm going to go back to, I didn't really have to think about myself as a minority and playing a sport that, let's just be fair and honest, for all intents and purposes is still thought of as a very Caucasian sport. It seems like, you know, I used to see all of these numbers about like the diversity of tennis, but it's diversity in all sports. I know we're talking tennis here, but it's really diversity in all sports and all areas of life. It kind of mirrors, you know, our United States, right? I think just putting a racket in the hands of these kids when they're young. I mean, I teach at a high school that is predominantly Hispanic, you know, and, you know, when I ask now, mind you, it's also a private high school. So, you know, some of these families are a little more well off than some others, but it's very important to me that they're also learning how to give this back. Like, how to make sure that they are passing this forward, to talk to their friends about it, talk to their siblings about it, talk to the neighbor kids about it. But just creating opportunities to put the racket in their hand, I think that in and of itself creates momentum for the sport. Diego, I know y'all do a lot in Laredo,
Yes.
so I bet like you
That's
probably
what I
have
was gonna.
stories of like people, like I know in the East Coast we had a lot of refugees, and like I have great stories of them because they literally would come to the courts. They didn't have shoes, they never had a racket, and our kids, the ones that are a little more privileged who can pay for these private, are bringing them their extra shoes, are bringing them their extra rackets. And so it just forms this kind of like something Erica said earlier, it's this friendship. And now you have something, you're bonded with someone. And tennis is easier to bond with another person because it is one-on-one. You have to talk to that person. You have to like communicate, versus if you're on a big team, you don't have to, like your team is your people, it's not the other opponent. But in tennis, your opponent becomes your friend.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So that friendship that is made is just like the familia that we've been talking about in the Hispanic culture. I mean, I think tennis brings people together, but it's also not as accessible as some other sports that are maybe more predominant in the Hispanic culture. So I think just trying to make it as accessible as possible. That's what we can use the momentum that we've been gaining throughout these last 10 years, as y'all have said, and just keep it going. And with my generation, just to get leaders in this generation to keep the accessibility up and get everyone playing, no matter where they come from or their background.
Thank you all so much for that. As we move into the last question I had prepared, it really is around just us providing some insight to those of us outside of the Latinx Hispanic community about what makes it unique and special. So, you know, we all have different relationships and connections to our culture, but as members of the Hispanic community, obviously you have a unique perspective about what makes it unique and special. And, you know, this is a moment to brag on your community, on your heritage. Bobby, if we could start with you, what is it to you, and certainly anyone who wants to chime in, you know, what makes your group unique, special in comparison to other minority groups across our country?
Well, that's a tough question because I mean, I think what Deb was saying was that it is a predominantly, Caucasian sport. So most of the people I play with are Caucasian, although there are several of my tennis players that I play with that are Hispanic, and we just, what I noticed of the cultural differences, it's very we mesh really well. Got several players that have moved in from the Rio Grande Valley that are living up here now that are phenomenal players. Some of them have moved in from other areas as well. But that's a very broad, it's a big broad question for that. I think the Hispanic culture bringing in playing tennis brings a lot of that family orientation and fun that we are able to mix and educate, for lack of a better word, or at least get other people to experience the barbecues, because we'll have barbecues together, after leagues, and we'll do the fajitas, we'll do the piñata for the kids, and we'll do, so we kind of, bring in that culture. But although in San Antonio, that culture is pretty much kind of instilled a little bit more now than it was before. So I think from that perspective, I think it's you said San Antonio's got the mariachis, they've got it's here, and it's wonderful, and I think a lot of people appreciate it.
Bobby, I can certainly understand where you're coming from, being in the same town as you. I think the one element that Hispanics have going is their pride, their history, the combination of the word familia with everything, and that relation to that. I think if individuals can understand the hardships and the struggles that they have been through, they will make strides in developing friendships and leading them to this. And I think erasing that barrier that tennis is a predominantly Anglo sport is one thing. It's just finding out where the need is. And like Deborah has alluded to, putting rackets in their hands. We went through, just an example, the church that I belong to had a partner church on the south side. I went and talked to them Wednesday night. We set up a couple of times to come. We set up in the parking lot, little nets. We taught the kids to play. Some of the parents joined in, and then they were able to carry that on. So again, just understanding where they're coming from, their needs. If we would not have done this, these kids would never have ever touched a racket. So I think that that's just embracing everything that there is about the Hispanic culture.
I think it's like anything, right? If you don't see people that are like you doing something, you're less likely to do it. So if all of your friends are playing baseball, if all of your friends are playing soccer, then you're going to migrate to that sport. I mean, we get lots of kids that come to where I teach now. And they come because, oh, my friend, oh, the neighbor's doing it. Oh, so it's a matter of making those connections. How we do it, that's always going to be the age-old question, right? Because what works today might not work 2 years from now. We have to constantly be changing, how we look at the sport, how it's growing. I mean, obviously, lots of strides have been made in the sport in and of itself, but we're still, there's still a lot more work to be done. How we get there, that, like Bobby is saying, that's kind of like, that's the age-old question. Is like, I don't know that we can really answer that today, but food for thought.
Yeah, I think Just like a lot of what you guys were saying, I had an example of that with, I mean, my grandfather and his buddies going out to play every week. And sometimes I would join in with them when I got good enough to. And after every time we play, we go across the street to the taco stand and go have some tacos and kind of just talk about tennis and just everything. So that's kind of like integrating the Hispanic culture to the tennis court, bringing it to the tennis court, and also just building a family. That's one aspect where I think we can continue to build on for the future generations.
I have a new event idea now. Tacos and tennis. It's
Yep.
happening. Thank you, Diego. Thank you to all four of you. I think this has been a great discussion where some insight and into your culture has been created and allowing us to not only see you as members of the Latinx Hispanic community, but as people and what your journeys have been like and the benefits of tennis. Tennis extends your life almost 10 years in comparison to every other sport. Becky and I learned that at a national meeting, and the USTA has been very proud about that and all the benefits that exist while playing the sport. And yes, Deb, representation matters. And Diego, we do. I think all of us would be in agreement that we hope that you play tennis the rest of your life, and that is a long life, because you are the future of our sport. Not only the present, because obviously you're a collegiate student athlete, but the future of our sport. And having someone like Dr. Trevino, your grandfather, the president of our section, really allows you to see what's possible. And Bobby, there's not enough of you. There's not enough Hispanic officials. And thank you for being representation there for people to see someone who looks like themselves, who also could do what you're doing by contributing to the sport outside the lines. Bobby, you had something to share?
Yeah, just what we're trying to do. You got the L1 Winter Nationals for the 12s and 14s here in San Antonio. So we're trying to come up with some kind of theme, for the player party.
I think you should do like a fiesta theme.
Yeah, so we're trying to find, like, apparently Brian Otis was telling me that when they do the Kalamazoo, they do like blueberries and cream, which is a takeoff to the strawberries and cream from Wimbledon.
Yeah.
So we want to do something kind of similar, but have it more like a Hispanic type dish.
Oh, empanadas and conchas. I mean,
Churros.
Yeah. So we're looking for all of those kinds of ideas, and I'm even thinking about possibly having mariachis at the player.
Oh, that would be so. Or like the little
the maracas.
The maracas. Give those out in the player bags, man.
Would be a very good idea. Did that at a wedding. Bobby, do you have a committee that's for those ideas?
It's really Brian, Nancy, myself, and I've got one other person that's helping. So no, not a big one.
Well, I'm willing to help and volunteer, Bobby. So
I will too. Just
okay, awesome. We'll definitely look at that. Thank you.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I think if we were talking about cultures and communities, I think that we all think that our culture and our community is unique and special, right? And sometimes I think that maybe we should stop thinking of us in terms of what sets us apart and start thinking in terms of what makes us the same. How can we come together? Because if we're always trying to be different, that's what people see, and I'm a little bit privileged in that oftentimes I've been able to get a little bit ahead. I don't know how to put this politically correct, but because people don't see Latin or Mexican in me, they see Caucasian. So sometimes I feel like, I've had more privilege than maybe, someone like Diego, for instance, maybe, because his skin is browner, right, than mine. It's this, and it's real, right? So sometimes I think I love that we have, we have these talks and stuff, but sometimes I really feel like the more that we segregate ourselves and want to talk about how different we are, the more we're doing disservice to all of our communities and all of our diverse groups.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think for me, I am all about inclusion in any way, in any and all ways possible. And certainly there's so much more that makes us the same versus what divides us and makes us different. For me, in this moment, this is about education, awareness, and celebration. And so you can have pride in your community without saying we're better or we're trying to separate ourselves out. It's a time to say, you all are awesome. We're going to celebrate the heritage and what makes this community a part of what makes our state and our country great. But at all times, you know, there's an intersectionality that exists between not only being Hispanic, but being Hispanic and a person with a disability, or being LGBTQ, or just different socioeconomic areas. So there's levels to this. And I certainly hear what you're saying, Deb, because again, we're stronger together, and inclusivity is something that is very much at my core. So thank you for sharing that. And as we close, thank you to all four of you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you to our viewers for taking the time to help us celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. We will celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month 12 months a year, 365 days a year. However, this discussion certainly allows us to really recognize it during officially September 15th through October 15th. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you again for your time.